All right, we're live. So, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to episode 3 of This Week in Lightning. I am Nate, my co-host Lisa, and we have a very special guest, Bastien. How do you pronounce your last name?
That's Teinturier.
Beautiful, and aka T-BAST, and he's
Yeah,
a
that's interesting.
spec dev at ACINQ. Lisa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nate. Weather here in Texas is incredible today, so yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome. I see it out the window, but I have not been outside yet. Maybe
I got a
after I
text.
talk.
I got a text from one of my friends who's really a big believer of natural sun vitamin D as being the human battery kind of thing. So she
Yeah,
was like, Lisa, amazing sunlight today from 11:30 to 1:30. So I was out walking around with the dogs.
good.
All
And
dancing.
Bastien, welcome. Big fan of yours. Can you tell our audience what you do?
Thanks. So I'm working at ACINQ on Lightning, basically all things Lightning, specification, our backend implementation, Eclair, and also a bit on our mobile wallets, Phoenix and Eclair Mobile. Tons of stuff to do and tons of interesting stuff to learn.
Yeah, I mean, most of my experience these days is with LND. Lisa is slowly nudging me towards the C Lightning way of things, though, and I'm looking forward to trying that out soon. And for those that don't know, Eclair was one of the original mobile wallets. I think it was early 2019, I want to say, Eclair came out, and that was my first experience with the Lightning Network. There was actually a food truck in South Florida, shout out Savory Eats food truck, that actually accepted Lightning payments all the way back in 2019, which was
And did it
really
work?
cool. It was awesome. I mean, my Eclair did not. It was so early, like the channels weren't out there, so I had to open up a channel with them first before I could pay them. But it was still amazing. So I want to shout out Eclair. That was awesome. And besides that, I mean, what else? What else is Async working on these days? I know a lot of people know of Async, at least from being the largest node on the network, largest public node on the network. A lot of folks see that when they start a Lightning node and start looking at the peer databases or the node databases. I've used async frequently when bootstrapping my own LND nodes because I like to open up a huge channel with async and then use the Lightning Labs loop out to get a bunch of inbound liquidity from you, which always helps. But yeah, please tell us about it.
Soon you'll be able to do liquidity ads to get your liquidity from our node directly. It's going to be much simpler than having to do another on-chain transaction with a looping.
That sounds exciting.
But yeah, we're working. We've been one of the things that I've been focusing on for a while has been finishing up our initial implementation of Anchor outputs and mostly of the RBF part because this thing is it's a huge can of worms. It's a huge rabbit hole. Once you start diving into RBF and all the mempool
Mm.
behavior, there's just so many things that can go wrong. And it's crazy. I want to, it's like whack-a-mole where I want to fix something and then I realize that, oh, there's another edge case in P2P and mempool logic that could bite us and this is people's money. So I want to close that as soon as I can. And it took me so long to get the first version out, and now it's ready. We're going to make a release soon where we're going to enable it by default. But then there's just so much work that still needs to be done at the Bitcoin level, at the Bitcoin mempool level. With Gloria has been doing a lot of work on package relay, and she's also
Wow.
realizing that RBF needs some more love. So I'm going to spend time on that because I think it's really important for the security of any protocol that builds on Bitcoin. And apart from that, we're going to start working, at least I'm going to start working on dual funding, splicing, liquidity add, all these things once I have this first Encore output version out and I feel confident enough that our funds are safe. And we're also working hard on offers. And I think that offers is going to be a big change in the UX because our goal is to integrate it in Phoenix as soon as we can and see what comes out of it, just spearhead this thing and see what people think, what people like, what people don't like, what people build on top of this. And I think it's going to keep us occupied for a while because there's going to be a long feedback loop here, and we'll have to learn a lot about what works for users and what doesn't.
So let's dive in just to a couple of those just for our audience. So RBF is replaced by fee, and it is a way that, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you broadcast an on-chain transaction and you pay a fee that is not getting confirmed, replaced by fee is a way of rebroadcasting it on top of another transaction.
Exactly. So the idea why you want to use it a lot in Encore outputs is when a channel force closes, usually you'll have HTLCs that need to be claimed by someone, and you have a time window during which you have to claim them, because otherwise if that time window expires, then there's a race between you and your peer, and you might lose some funds if your transaction doesn't get confirmed before a deadline. So on the one hand, you want it to confirm as soon as possible just to be safe. But on the other hand, if you have like 144 blocks, it doesn't make sense to pay a very high fee to get it integrated into the next block. So you're going to start broadcasting a transaction that pays a kind of low fee so that it gets confirmed before the deadline, but not too fast because you don't want to overpay the fees. But then if the fee rate starts rising and your transaction does not confirm in time, you have to replace it with another one that pays more fees. But then there are a lot of potential issues. There are a lot of things that can go wrong at that point because Bitcoin is very strict in how you can replace a transaction. And whenever there are like 5 rules in BIP 125 that describe how you can replace a transaction, and some of them make it really hard to efficiently use your capital. Because whenever, for example, you spend one of these HTLCs, you create a change output in that transaction, but until that transaction is confirmed, by default, Bitcoin will not use that change output for other transactions, because if you replaced the first transaction, you would invalidate all the transactions that come afterwards. So by default, Bitcoin does not let you do that, but we introduced a flag to do it that was introduced in Bitcoin 22, I think, include unsafe. But once you start doing that, you need to handle a lot of cases where a lot of your transactions disappear and become completely invalid because one of their ancestors has been replaced. And the RBF logic in Bitcoin Core can create a lot of problems for you here. So there's a lot of things that you need to worry about, and it's really hard.
So will most of this, the solution to this issue that we're working on, is that mostly going to be on the Lightning side or the Bitcoin side?
It has to be on both. There are a lot of things we can do on the Lightning side, but we cannot be 100% safe if no changes happen on the Bitcoin side. Or at least we can be 100% safe, but that means we will have to pay a lot of fees, whereas we could be much more fee efficient. And an attacker or just a malicious peer could grief you a lot by making you force close a lot of channels with HTLCs that you have to claim on chain, and they could make you pay a lot of on-chain fees, and they could even take you out of business if they do that a lot and you're not able to detect them and to ban them in time, because you will just spend a lot of your money on on-chain fees and realize at some point that you have eaten up all your capital just paying fees to protect some money. So we want to make it hard to do for attackers, but this is hard.
Is this the same attack that they were talking about when on-chain fees are already high, so that force close pre-signed transaction doesn't meet the requirements to get confirmed? Is it that one?
Oh yeah, there's that one as well.
Okay.
But yeah, Anchor outputs kind of makes this one a bit better because now we can just set the fee rate when we close the channel. We don't have to guess beforehand what the fee rate is going to be. So at least we can ensure we can almost ensure that our transaction would get there, but in order to be safe in all cases, we would need something called package relay in Bitcoin. And until we have that, there's always a possibility that if the fee rate is too high for too long, you won't be able to get your transactions in the mempool at all. And then you're just screwed. So
Wow.
hopefully we get package relay soon.
Package relay. Let's do it. Lisa, what do you think?
Yeah, I think package relay is going to be an enormous improvement for user experience and like, I hate to say safety, but some amount of fun safety. But I think it's going to be really crucial for making Lightning a little bit more predictable. It takes away a lot of edge cases right now that we have a lot of trouble engineering for. One thing that I think is kind of interesting about the way that ACINQ decided to build Claire is you guys don't have a wallet on inside the app, the Lightning node, right? So I think in this way, you guys are kind of similar to, like, let's say LDK, which is the Lightning Development Kit coming out of Spiral, which is like formerly known as like the Squares Bitcoin Research Organization. I guess they're called the Blocks now. I don't know.
Block.
Hard to know what to call things so people know what you're talking about. Anyways, like when they keep changing the names, you're like, okay, I don't know who's up to date on the fact that their name changed now. Anyways, you guys don't have like a wallet inside your node. You guys rely on, my understanding is that y'all rely on Bitcoin Core for wallet stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, like it seems like ACINQ as a team is a lot more closely aligned, and I feel like you guys push a lot more new feature requests and stuff onto Core than like C Lightning does, because we just like have our own wallet implementation. When we need something, we just add it for ourselves.
Yeah, but you just can't. Even if you do something on your wallet, if it doesn't meet the mempool policies, it will just be rejected by other nodes on the network. So
this is true. Yeah, no, this is totally true. So like for the dual funding, so the cool thing about the V2 opens, as I like to call dual funding, sometimes that term gets overloaded by people that aren't actually doing dual funding, but call it that anyways. But like
I have no idea what you're talking about.
What?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's so, naming things is so hard when people start calling different things by the same name. Anyways, so like V2 opens, there's an RBF protocol that we added to that. I wouldn't say it's like there's a few things like liquidity adds and RBF. I think I still need to finish up exactly. I'm hoping to get to that as soon as this accounting stuff is done. Like the way those interact is kind of weird. But anyways, there's an RBF part of the dual funding protocol, and it really interacts badly with one of the rules that I want to. Anyways, Gloria just sent out a really great long email about how we're looking to update the RBF rules. I think there's a lot of really great proposals in there. One of the things I've been meaning to write an email kind of response to push back on is for a long time in the replaced by fees rules is there was a rule that any new transaction you sent out had to, in total fees, pay more than the previous transaction that you're replacing. So like on the RBF like sequence though with this dual funding stuff, you don't have a lot of control over what the agreed upon transaction is, right? So you and your peer build a transaction together, and then you sign it and you send it out, and there's like a fee rate that the opener has decided you're going to pay. But this, the fee rate is set by the opener, and in the protocol, we can enforce that the fee rate is always higher, right? And we can enforce the fee rate is always higher by a certain amount, and that's really easy to do as a protocol. The problem is that if like I start opening a channel with you and I decide that I'm going to set the fee rate at like, I don't know, 5 sats per byte, and you decide as the person who as my peer, you want to also put funds in at 5 sats per byte, you can do that. So we build a transaction, let's say it's like 1,000 bytes. I don't know, I'm like kind of just picking some random numbers here, right? So it's 1,000 byte transaction. So it's paying 5,000 sats in fees total. And then let's say fee rates spike and I'm opening a channel. I've decided that like I'd really like to get this channel open, so I'm gonna do an RBF on this channel, and I'm gonna bump my fee rate up all the way to like I don't know, 20 sats per byte. But you decide, as my peer, we're renegotiating the open. You don't have to put funds in it this time. You can say, I'm not going to add any bytes to it. So now, let's say the transaction is missing all your half of it. So now, for whatever reason, the new transaction we're replacing it with is only 500 bytes. But the fee rate's only, 10? So we're still at 5,000 total. So even though it's a smaller transaction and it's paying more per byte to get into the mempool, the way that the rules are written, this transaction isn't valid. And like right now in the RBF protocol, we just like, what happens is we go all the way through it. We go all the way through putting the transaction together. We sign it, we try and send it, it fails to broadcast, and it's just like, okay, start over. So then you have to, then the next thing you do is like, okay, you renegotiate the RBF with a higher fee rate. It's really bad UX. There's like trying to take this into account, like trying to take like the total fee into account when you're like building the transaction is also really difficult because you don't know. And so you've got the whole transaction, how much they're going to pay, like how much your peer is going to add bytes wise. Anyways, so like Gloria, I think part of the new rules is we're getting rid of, at least partially, this idea that you have to always, there's like excuse me. Oh no, I'm gonna have to go grab some water. Okay, I'm gonna be right back.
Right now? Okay, go.
Yeah, sorry.
There's a lot of questions on what you said. Grab your water and...
Yeah, okay, I'll be right back, sorry.
It's all good. So do you work, we'll get back to what Lisa was talking about, but on a more simple topic, I guess, is your team working close with like Rusty Russell on offers? Like, is everyone kind of coming together on that?
Yeah, definitely. On our team, it's Thomas is working. He's doing most of the work on onion messages and now offers, and he's done a lot of back and forth with Rusty. Reviewed the PR, the spec PR a lot of times. Discussed it with him. He had a few calls with Rusty directly to discuss issues. So yeah, it's we're talking a lot to Rusty. There are many things that Rusty is spearheading. He's doing so many good things for the network. So there are many topics where we regularly discuss with him.
That's amazing. That just excites me. Okay, Lisa, continue.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. I like had some. Anyway, it's fine. Tickly throat. There's so basically like it's really hard. This rule's really makes it really difficult to build applications on top of RBF is going to be my like thing, the like total amount thing, especially when you're dealing with like two different parties and like there's sort of this unknown amount of where you don't have a lot of control over the final transaction size, if that makes sense. So like I have to pick a fee rate before I know how big this transaction is going to be. Just based on the way that the protocol is written, and that makes it almost impossible to know how much total fee I'm going to be paying at the time that I'm picking the fee rate. Anyways, so basically it means that like your RBFs are like not guaranteed to succeed like ever, and it would be really frustrating, right, to have to like bump up your fee rate and then the other side decides to put more stuff in and then you're like way over the limit, etc. So I think one way we could really improve RBF, and I need to write an email to this effect, I've been meaning to, is I think like it would be a lot easier for applications if, and I think you can make a good case that it is incentive compatible with relayers, that every additional byte has to be X% worth X% more than every previous byte you did. So that basically means you have to increase the fee rate per byte by a certain amount, but kind of removing the total amount thing. And I think what I really like about doing that is it's simple. It's easy to write a protocol around. I think as far as like relay and denial of service is concerned, it is strictly more, every byte that you transmit then is guaranteed to be more valuable to a miner than every previous byte you've relayed across the network, right? Because like you've increased the fee rate, so every single byte you're paying more sats per byte to get that in a transaction. So every byte is more valuable. And then the other thing that I like about it is that it means that your transaction is strictly moving up in the when you look at it by itself. I think things get more complicated when you start looking at it from a package perspective. But I think I'm also like, well, I don't think we should like, having to concern ourselves with like the package stuff when you're building a transaction is like, it just gets really complicated. Other thing that's really difficult for RBF is that like as a Lightning node, you're not one of the design constraints that we try to use when we're building Lightning nodes is that a Lightning node doesn't know what's in the mempool. Is that, Bastien, would you say that's like a pretty accurate? Maybe it's just Matt Corallo who's been saying this, but.
Excuse me, I didn't get the end of your question.
Or like oh, so sorry. My question is like the how reasonable is it that a Lightning node needs to know what the mempool looks like?
Oh, ideally you would not need to know a lot, but in reality you have to know a lot because for example, just in your case, if you accept other people's input to fund a channel, you need to verify what happens if those inputs are spending unconfirmed ancestors that are then replaced, and these inputs become completely invalid and your transaction will never be able to become valid again. It's a mess. It's very easily a mess. So you have to look into the mempool and you have to look at all the ancestors of a transaction, and there's just a lot of uncertainty there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think like from C Lightning, we verify that it's a SegWit output, that you're spending a SegWit output, right? So the transaction we're making isn't malleable. But I think beyond that, we don't really verify that they're like valid. And if they're invalid, then like that channel will just never open, and that's like to some extent fine. Since you have inputs in the transaction, you can always cancel it by spending them elsewhere. So
yes.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, I think the whole mempool thing, I think the thing with the mempool is you can get really, really complicated in terms of like the design that you try to do when you try and take all these mempool situations into account. And I think there's a lot of edge cases, and it's hard to account for all of them. And it requires a decent amount of computation, I think, to like trace and track all these things. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that like as system designers, though, I think to some extent, where possible, we should just try and make things as like simple as possible. And then, admittedly, there aren't edge cases that we can always like take care of, but in those cases, it's just like always know that the escape clause or the failure case isn't one where like users are going to lose funds, right?
Yeah. And there's one thing to really keep in mind every time you design something in a Lightning or interaction is that there's just no global mempool. Even your view of the mempool could be conflicting with all your peers, and what you have in your mempool may just be completely replaced by something else. And so you cannot just trust your mempool to represent miners' mempool, because what interests you when you're publishing transaction is what ends up in the miners mempool, because that's why it matters. That's why it's going to get confirmed. But you have no idea whether your own mempool is just the same as what is in the miners. So you just have to have mechanisms to ensure that you can get a transaction across all the way to the miners mempool because it makes sense, and because it's the one that makes more sense for them to mine, because it will be the most profitable for them. And as long as you just take that into account and try to aim for that, you should be okay. But you should not make too many assumptions about, oh, my mempool has this particular tree of unconfirmed transactions, so I should be able to be smart about fees and do this thing, because then you're going to get burnt.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah. And I think this is like when we're talking about RABF, like I think you point out, Bastien, like the like relay is what we really care about, right? And that's like kind of the problem with like the pinning attack right now is that it prevents relay, right? So like one thing I think when we're like talking about these RBF rules and how to fix them is like we want to make sure that the relay rules, like the rules about what you're allowed to relay and like how to get something relayed, are like fairly well understood and like simple enough that you don't really need like a global understanding of the mempool in order to be able to have some amount of assurance that your transactions are going to get relayed, right?
Yeah, you just want to say, I want to get that thing relayed, and either I don't hear anything and I wait for a few blocks to see if it's confirmed, or at some point I hear that, oh, there's actually a conflict and my transaction was rejected, so now I should retry with higher fees, or just have this passive signal that it's not getting confirmed, whereas judging from my mempool, the fee rate I sent should be enough for it to confirm, so then I will fee bump anyway and see if that helps. So yeah, that's the only things I think you can do.
Yeah, Yeah. And I think like to the certain extent, it's beneficial to miners if more people are able to do RBF on will, right? At whim. Like if everyone is able to do an RBF whenever they need to like get into it, and the relay is like not guaranteed to work, but like, you know, the relay has like simple enough rules that most people can effectively do an RBF whenever they want to, if that makes sense. I think in general, this is like better for miners, right? Because more people end up sending more valuable bytes more frequently. And more applications will start building these tools to do this sort of stuff into it because it'll be more predictable. Like the relay, like you'll have a better assurance that it'll actually relay when you make a new one, right? Because you've followed these like simple, you know, fairly more simple rules about like doing the relay. So I think that like making more applications and more Bitcoin stuff able to do RBF and having rules that are simple enough that most people can understand under like, hey, as long as like something as simple as like, okay, I'm just paying X% more per byte than my previous transaction. Is like, I think most people can understand that, right? Like previously my transaction was this big and I was paying like 3 sats per byte. Now it's this big and I have to pay like at least 6 sats per byte. It doesn't matter how big the transaction is, as long as I'm paying at least like 6 sats per byte, which is like double my previous whatever. I think that's like really understandable for people, right? It's like, I want like, this is more important. I'm like paying X% more, like ready, set, go. It's fine. I think like, yeah, I think once you get those rules like out, I think a lot more wallet developers will be able to write wallet software that like implements them. And then like, you know, more people doing RBF, like I said, it's like only good for miners, right? Like at the end of the day, more people trying to spend more money to get their transactions mined is like, then I think you actually do get a more competitive fee market, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really surprised that miners are not getting involved in those discussions and are not getting involved into helping make these rules simpler for users and more profitable for them. I haven't seen anyone from the miners end chime in on all these issues, and I think they're part of the ones who benefit the most from that. So I'm surprised that they're not tracking this and not participating into it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
That's really
Yeah,
good.
I think this is like part of what makes this conversation so hard too, right? Is like I have no idea how closely like the mempool corresponds to whatever it is that miners are using to make block templates, right? So like we can sit here and talk all day about what a miner block template looks like and what it takes to get into like, you know, block templates like the thing that they're trying to find hashes on, right? So those are the actual set of transactions that have made it out of the mempool and are like actually in the next candidate block at each miner. I have no idea like when a transaction, like if it hits the mempool now, how many like how long does it take for it to get to that like into that block template, right? Like if they've already built the block template and I send out a transaction that's like would be at the top of the next block, do they redo their block template? Like how late is too late to like get into the next block, even if you're paying like super premium transaction fees, you know? Like I think there's a lot of questions about like how the algorithms and block template stuff building is happening. Like I don't have any insight to, and I don't know how many people in like Cordev have insight into how that happens.
I guess Matt would know a lot about that probably, and who else had worked on that? The way I understand it is that they should change the block template anytime they can because it doesn't reset it's just proof of work is just probabilistic. It doesn't reset. It's not because you spent already a lot of cycles trying to mine this block that changing it for the next cycle changes anything. So you can just change the block template at every computation cycle, and the probabilities that you get a block that fits the difficulty is the same. So I would expect them to change the block template all the time whenever they get transactions that pay more fees. But I have no idea if that's what they use and if that's the code they're running.
And when we say the miners getting involved, do we mean specifically the pools, whoever's running the pools, or the individual hashers? Right? Because like if Slush Pool or something got involved with this, then I don't know. I'm just trying to follow that rabbit hole a little bit.
Yeah, I've been just getting involved into discussing on the mailing list all the solutions, all the way they would like the rules to be, or what they thought about, and what would be what from their point of view would be the best incentives. So I think it would make sense to have them follow that. And even once a solution that makes sense for them is floating around, help push it get accepted into Bitcoin. Because then even if and when we find good rules, better rules than the current ones, it would take so much time to get it just integrated into the code and then deployed enough so that you can use it. Because even once it's released in Bitcoin Core, you can only use it when, I guess, half of the network uses it. Because if half of the network uses the old rules, you're not just going to try your new rules because it may fail to relay. So you will still have to stick by the old rules for so long that we need to get the new rules in as soon as possible so that this waiting period starts as soon as possible, and maybe in 3 years we can start using these new rules.
I mean, I know it is, but like, how big of an issue is it that we just don't have enough people working on it? Or is it more like it just takes a lot more research and negotiation?
I think it's a mix of a lot of research and then getting people interested, because even when we have an interesting thing, there are too many things happening on Bitcoin. There's just so many things in many different like boxes of what Bitcoin does that are happening and that are using up people's review time and thinking time. And I'm not sure throwing more resources at it would help that much, because we are mostly limited by the people who have the abilities to review that kind of stuff, and they are scarce and they will stay scarce for a while. So we just need these people to have this move up in their ladder of priorities of things that must be done in Bitcoin. But there are so many other things that are really important as well. So,
but yeah, and I hope it always stays that way, but it'll be done when it's done. It'll be ready when it's ready. And there's no point in rushing it, even though we all would like to see a lot of these solutions come to fruition. I'm sure they will. Bitcoin's only 13 years old. I think we'll be okay.
yes.
What do you guys think that, I don't know about this, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. Whenever in the coming years we switch to PLTCs, will that have any effect on what we were just talking about?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Switch to what? To
the point lock.
PTLCs.
Yeah. The point time lock channels.
6 months.
Yeah. Well, I just don't want all this work done and then like that come out and then it all be scrapped. I don't know.
Those are super unrelated. Like the nice thing about the PTLC stuff is I would call it like, and Bastien, I feel like you've done a lot more work on this than I have. So like, please correct me when I say incorrect things. I'm sure that will happen. But I think that the nice thing about PTLCs is that they're fairly, like the scope change of that and the total number of things that it impacts, at least in a first pass on Lightning, is very, very small. So like I feel like the PTLC stuff, depending on how complicated you want to get in with it, like that is like a pretty like I'm gonna call it surgical again. I might be wrong about this, but it's like a pretty like kind of cordon off change to Lightning. So a lot of the other stuff we've been talking about won't at all be impacted by a PTLC move over.
That's true, but it's on the spec side, it's quite we can do it with quite a small change. At least the last version I've been able to iterate on is quite small on the spec side, but on the implementation, actually changing from hashes to these points, I think that it touches so many places of your code that it takes a lot more time than you'd expect. It's not that hard, but I think there are a lot of surprises, and it will just end up touching so many things in your code base where you'd have to just migrate some DBs, some indexes from something to something else, and it's going to take a long while. And you don't want to mess that up, because there's a risk that you will mess up someone's a node, all the channels of a node, trying to migrate them to this thing. Or so yeah, that's not something we want to rush.
If I was a betting man, I would say like 5 years minimum, probably.
Oh no, I that.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
they're
know.
coming a lot sooner because
Okay.
to a certain extent, there's a lot less from like a spec side, like Bastien was saying, like the things we have to re-architect on the spec are fairly small. Never mind the fact you have
Oh,
to
I see.
re-architect like a whole bunch of your actual application. Um, but at least like I feel like it's pretty well understood what all is touched in the
I see.
spec, and I don't think it's going to change behavior so much as it just changes the way that we negotiate certain things. It's like
Okay. So really,
Yeah,
the
even
time
though
is.
there might be surprises because when we finally merged the Anchor Outputs PR to the spec, we felt we had a good understanding of it, that it wouldn't touch so many things, but in fact it was such a fundamental change in behavior and in how you guarantee offense safety that it was much longer to get it to put from prototype to production ready. And I think it's going to be the same with PTLC. It's going to be quite fast to get a prototype working and something that works on rec test with Node, and the code is quite okay, but there are edge cases you want to cover. But then getting it production ready might take a lot more time. And I have no idea that there are a lot of unknowns in there. So I have no idea how long it would take. But the prototype part should be quite simple to do.
it's a good point.
I'm looking forward to being part of the Reckless crew once again. I'll just start another
Nice.
PTLC node.
Yeah. Nate, why are PTLCs on your radar? That seems like a weird question. But
I don't know.
like,
They brought it up at BitDevs, and I just keep hearing rumors of, oh gosh, we're gonna have to close all of our channels and do this, like reboot the Lightning Network. Like people are still talking like that. Like it's gonna be sort of like we're in a beta test right now, and that'll be the actual Lightning Network. I don't know. That might be a little bit
No, no.
hyperbole, but I've been hearing talk about that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's gonna be in quite an incremental upgrade because you can just activate it once you and your peers start to use it. All your channels will start to support it. But if we want to use it end to end, then you need to have a route where everyone supports it. So at first it's going to be frustrating because all your channels will support it, but all the payments you make will not be able to use PTLC
Okay.
because someone else down the road does not support it. But then I think that it's just gonna slowly spread, and at some point it's just I don't think it's going to be that long to get everyone to update because it's different from Bitcoin, and people update their Lightning nodes quite fast. So especially there are so many things that we improve or bugs that we fix that I guess, and new features coming in much more than in Bitcoin, that I guess people upgrade their nodes more frequently. So we can
True.
hope that once it's ready, it's gonna spread around across the network quite quickly.
that's cool. Yeah, I
At
hope
least that's
that's
my
true. I
hope.
hope that continues to be true. I mean, we just got to keep shipping bugs, so there's critical fixes people have to update for, right?
That's what I was just thinking. Like when a Bitcoin Core version comes out, it's more like adding features than it is stopping bugs. I guess still sometimes there's some stopping bugs, but it's mostly adding features. But when a Lightning, like an LND version comes out, it's like bug fixes. So it's like you kind of want to update that. Or maybe it's just me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like Lightning also ships new features, right? I feel like the shipping new features on Lightning, maybe I'm wrong about this, but it feels like in general, when new stuff comes out on Lightning, it's like a step function change in how the network works to some extent. Whereas on Bitcoin Core at this point, when new features come out, I'm not really sure. I'm not always sure exactly what the impact that's going to have on like me as a Bitcoin user is, right? So it's like a little less run and update your node kind of situation.
At this point, it's kind of like I'll update my core node when my Lightning version tells me to. Or
That's a good way of doing it, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think the main difference is that we can say that Bitcoin is already stable, and at the point where some people even want to stabilize it and ossify it more. Whereas Lightning, we shipped the first version of Lightning, but even when we shipped it, we knew that it was far from being the thing we would call 1.0 or real really ready, and that shows because none of our implementation is a 1.0 something. We're all a 0. Something version, and I think that for example, where I would draw the line at saying that I would call this really production ready would be when we have package relay in Bitcoin. We're using zero fee transactions everywhere, PTLCs. We have reworked the gossip to be more private. We use a new version of Anchor outputs everywhere with hopefully new SIGAsh flags that don't require us to add new inputs to HTLC. So there's so many things that I really want, that are big things that will take a lot of time. And before that, I would not say that Lightning is able to ossify yet. So people still need to update all the time. We're slowly getting there.
As someone that just runs a node, I think the more like offers are great, ads are great. Lightning Pool is pretty great too. This whole sort of trying to folks that come online to get them inbound liquidity quicker and easier with a quality peer without much friction. I'm looking forward to further developments on that. I don't know if we can put that into the spec at all, but it would just be great just to have just kind of like, hey, allocate 30 million sats to the network, pay me 4% on it, and just have it do its thing, or something like that. Would be cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there are kind of two tracks for features in Lightning right now. There's the things that are functional things that add to the network but don't change how it works fundamentally, like dual funding and liquidity ads are really features but don't completely change how the network works. But changes at the transaction level, like Anchor outputs or package relay, that kind of things are fundamental changes to the security and the long-term efficiency of the network, and are the kind of things that really force you to update your node. Once we get to the thing where all of these really core features of Lightning are working as we want, are perfect or close to perfect, then the only thing that we will build on top are features that you may or may not want. Some people will want liquidity ads, some people won't care. But there are so many things still that are more core features that we need to work on and that still deserve a lot of work, that we're a long way off before we can just be adding small features that people may want or not want.
I think talking about
what people need.
Talking about the future is just really fun, and theory crafting and stuff. What do you think is what's your opinion on projects that are using Lightning to do things other than payments specifically, like messaging? Last year we had people figure out how to transcribe Lightning messages into audio. I don't know exactly how they did that, but just or streaming payments. Do you think that Lightning can handle all of that if that takes off? Or I'm just curious what your opinion is on that. Or are we going to need a layer 3 someday?
To be honest, my first reaction is that I don't think Lightning can take this load, and I don't think that Lightning can take the load of a messaging app that works. So if it doesn't work, it's useless because your friends are not using it, and if all your friends are using it, it puts so much volume on the network that then it has to eat up some of the volumes that's necessary for people to make payments. And I think that payments is the most interesting thing we're solving, because to be honest, I don't think that these things really require such a decentralized network. They require good cryptography and some level of decentralization, but they don't require to run on Lightning. That's kind of overkill. That's like using the hammer when you need something much lighter. And I think that it can hurt the network, because it's different than Bitcoin, where anyone runs a node. It only helps the network to run a Bitcoin node, but actually when you're running a bad Lightning node, you can hurt the network. And the network is building efficiency to recognize those nodes and kind of work around them, but they're still hurting a bit the network. So it's really fundamentally different from Bitcoin here. And I think that we cannot hope that Lightning will just scale infinitely and be able to handle all of these things and be able to handle a lot of bandwidth. So I think that it's good to be optimistic and to build a lot of things, but I don't think all of those will be able to just run on Lightning if they start working at scale. And unfortunately, most of them are only interesting if they work at scale, because otherwise that they're so niche that they don't really benefit that much from that.
That's kind of where my head's going to. Like, at first it was kind of exciting. Oh, you could do all this other stuff too, but then I'm kind of like, well, like you said, like cryptography and all that, you know, we don't need to use Lightning for that. In theory, I don't know. People are just coming up with tons of stuff. This Impervious browser, they just sent out an update. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It's like the Graphene OS of internet browsers with Lightning Network built into it. Guy here in Austin, Texas is working on it, but they sent out a huge newsletter if you want to look it up, or Impervious. But do you guys want to see if the folks watching have some questions, or do you want to?
I would just add that just having a decentralized payment system that works instantly, lets you pay across the world, paying very low fees, and that's open for you to join in private. Yep. It's just already so huge. Well, it's just
that's
so good.
The killer app. For sure.
Getting that right and getting that thing to work well is just the most important thing. And I think that if some of those things that try to build on top of Lightning are hurting this use case, I would try to thwart them, because I want this use case to work very well as it can. That I think I would need to sacrifice some other use cases for that.
Would the congestion be from like having so many nodes running very little traffic that the gossip part of the network sort of falls apart, or you don't reach all of it? I don't want to get too, but that just kind of crossed my mind, because I know as the network gets bigger, the data gets more volume.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if that is going to be such an issue. We were afraid of it for a while, and then the gossip just works. It's not great, but it works, and it doesn't have that many issues, and it's something that you can easily scale on horizontally on multiple machines if you need to. So I'm not sure this is going to be the biggest choke point. I think payments are. It's just whenever you start wanting to use payments in your higher level protocol and you start using HTLCs or PTLCs and taking some liquidity from nodes, that's when you're going to start eating up a resource that is not unlimited.
Gotcha. I mean, that kind of like, there's a question from Bob here. It says, how can somebody with deep pockets and plenty of CPU resources help the Lightning Network grow? So, I'm not sure.
I feel like run a C Lightning node and offer up that liquidity on the liquidity ad market, provide inbound liquidity from nodes that want it, would be my very C Lightning centric answer.
Bootstrap a routing node and spread that liquidity around.
Yeah, offer it up for sale. Let people rent it out from you. Prove there is a market for liquidity on Lightning. I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah, because it's really hard to. How much do you think the liquidity market is actually necessary today for people making payments, and how much is just used for people optimistically rebalancing channels, or optimistically trying to set up their liquidity in one way without yet having demand for it? I have no idea, and we just can't measure that.
I experimented last year with opening up a big channel to Lightning Labs Loop node and charging 5,000 ppm fees on it, and then trying to buy that liquidity back from their pool service for less, and just kind of trying to pull something.
Nate? Were you doing an arbitrage?
I was trying. I think I did it with Bitrefill a little bit too, but it didn't take enough. There's just not enough people using the service yet for it to I don't know. It's too slow for now.
I see. I mean, I think the liquidity ad stuff, I think my intuition there, which, we don't get good data on liquidity ads. It's legitimately decentralized. There's no centralized. I don't know how many people have made things. I don't know how much money people have made off liquidity ads. I have no idea. It's kind of by design.
Yep.
Luckily, I'm not trying to build a product on this. I don't need to sell it to investors, etc. So like, it's fine that I don't know. But I think it does make it hard to talk about it in terms of like, is this a successful project? And like, feels successful? I don't know. Yeah, but anyways, my point is that fuck, I forgot what my point was. Like there's somewhere else I was going with this. It's fine, whatever. What were you talking about before I started talking?
No,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because I think that about liquidity X, for example, and whether people actually buy that liquidity because they want to make real payments, I think that all the wallets would really use it. I think it makes a lot of sense for wallets to use liquidity ads to have to ensure that they always have liquidity to receive. But for routing nodes buying liquidity, I think that it's just optimistically trying to set up your node to attract more payments, but you have no idea whether it's useful at all, or you're just making some money move around and it doesn't change anything. So, but we can't even measure it. So, but I think that for end users, merchants, and wallets, it makes a lot of sense because they would just use it because they pay. They would only use it if they know that they're going to need that liquidity.
That's right. Sorry, that's T-BAST brought up what I wanted to bring up is merchants. My understanding of the liquidity ad marketplace is that the ultimate buyer of that liquidity, in theory, would be merchants who have net inbound payments, right? Yeah. So if you're trying to set up a service and receive a bunch of payments inbound, the liquidity ad marketplace is going to be really invaluable.
I just thought the really cool thing about ads too is only one side has to wait. Right? With pool, both sides have to wait. You have to put in the bid, and you have to put in the ask, and you have to sit there and wait. With ads, if you want liquidity, you just go there and you pick it, and you're good, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a small problem that you don't actually know how much liquidity is on the other side of that ad. So if someone like only has like 1 million sats, you're trying to get 10 million sats.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
It's hard to tell how much available liquidity there is. You kind of just have to ask everyone and see what you end up with, which is kind of more work on the asker side. But yeah, if you're trying to sell it, it's literally as simple as like putting money on your node and setting up an ad and then just like forgetting it, you know? Mm-hmm. Like set it and forget it.
And that's what you want because there are people who have a lot of capacity and don't know what to make of that. So you want to make their jobs as easy as possible because they're the ones that need to have it easy so that it benefits the others who really want that liquidity to do the work, to search for it and search for the ad that makes that works for them.
Yeah. And the nice thing about ads is you can say, if it's your liquidity, you can say, okay, you get to pick the price that you are selling it at, right? So you set the price and then walk away. Maybe the market moves and people start paying more than you set, and that's not optimal, but ideally you've picked a price you're happy with, right? And then if you check in on it later, decide to move it up.
But it doesn't cost anything to post, right? So you can...
No, it's totally free.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
there's like no maintenance cost on running a liquidity ad.
Awesome. Okay, another little question here. I guess whatever short version, but like, what is compare Sea Lightning and Eclair basically? Any real differences or just different priorities and roadmaps for the same feature set? I think we went over that a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that if we could summarize that
in a way. Yeah, what at least from the Eclair side, we focus on maybe less features, but more, focus hard on the thing that we think is most important is just payments and getting these payments to work. So spending a lot of time getting that right and even pruning everything that is unnecessary. We try a lot to keep a small code base, really as small as possible and as efficient as possible and fight a lot the technical debt. And we sometimes refuse to add more things. We come later in the experimentation, I think, than Sea Lightning because Sea Lightning is spearheading more of spec research and getting those things out in code before everyone else and spearheading the work so that then we follow on the things that we think are really useful. So yeah, I think they're more adventurous than us here, and we are more focused on the maybe running a big node at scale, ensuring that everything works well, and that there's just no risk that when you update your node, everything is gonna fall apart. And
I mean, we care about that too, also, to be
yeah,
clear.
of course. Of course. But that just we tend to not do slower than you some of the things you do, because we're spending more time banging our heads and making sure that everything is right before, because we have so much at stake, because our node has a lot of our company's money, so we just cannot get it wrong. We have a huge skin in the game here.
Yeah, and I think
True,
that's actually
true.
one great thing about the ACINQ group is you guys are you want to get everything exactly right? So Sea Lightning will, I mean, we'll do our best to get a first draft out right and done, but it feels really good when ACINQ comes behind and does a really, has the ability to kind of look at what we've done already and suggest improvements and actually, what is the word? Like, I think you guys have just kind of a different perspective than we do on it. So when you're implementing things, it feels there's like it's a nice level of assurance, right? That you guys have gone through and done a good job of making sure we've dotted all the I's and crossed the T's on the stuff we've implemented.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's always interesting, and the thing that you mentioned earlier, that we do not have our own wallet and use Bitcoin D, that's one of the things that makes, especially for things like dual funding and anchor output, it makes our code different. We do not architect our solution the same way you do, I think, because we have constraints on what Bitcoin D offers us. So that makes us look at the problem a bit differently, and sometimes it helps find ways to make something better, or to rework something, or just find potential issues with something that maybe are not hitting users at all, but could hit users in the future. So that's always useful to have multiple implementations with different architecture doing the same thing. It always brings up new ideas, new observations. So I think it's really nice.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
I mean, I think Lightning's really lucky. We have so many different implementations working on with different philosophies, slightly different philosophies. I think it's certain amount of competition and duplication is good for getting moving the whole space forward.
all right.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
sorry. Go ahead. I'm gonna jump in here in a second though.
Right, good. I was just saying, yes, definitely perfect.
No, we're gonna wrap it up here soon, but it's still the first month of the year. We got a long way to go for 2022. What do you guys think? I don't know. Just tell me what your hopes and dreams are for this year. What are we gonna see? Are we gonna get any really cool features to play with? Are any projects gonna get completed? You know, not set in stone, just sort of like what your hopes are. Anyone can go.
Lisa, after you.
Oh wow, okay. I think on a practical level for like the whole Lightning Network, I think getting package relay done would be incredible. From a personal standpoint, like projects that I want to see get done, I'm recently decided I'm very interested in like this idea of negative fees. So like being able to create mechanisms to allow nodes to signal sort of rebalancing stuff. I see negative fee rates as kind of like I think I don't know if that's what the actual protocol or like suggestion we come up with will look like, but I think that's a good understanding of kind of like where my head's at these days in terms of new and interesting things for Lightning Network.
Interesting.
And also you're hoping to release a book and a course and so many things that are gonna help.
Yeah. We got a lot of
that stuff's like, I don't know. I mean, the book thing, like, yeah, that's going to be a lot of work, I think, in the next few months. But the thing about the book that I've been working on that for a couple of years now, so I've got like 80% of the manuscript already done. At this point, I'm just like editing it, cleaning some stuff up. So hopefully it won't be that much. I don't know. Anyways, Bastien, what are you guys looking forward to making happen in 2022?
Yeah, there are on the At the Bitcoin layer, I agree. Package relay would be great to have progress on, and reworking RBF rules and all of these mempool things it would be really useful if those things were making progress this year.
Mm-hmm.
And on the Lightning side, I'd say that I'm hoping that authors get shipped and starts being used a lot in the wild, and I'm hopeful that it will be done in 2022. And I'm hopeful that we will also be able to ship dual funding, splicing, and liquidity ads, and those will change the dynamics of how nodes interact with each other. So yeah, I think all those things, I'm hopeful that they will make a lot of progress in 2022.
We got a lot of hype in the chat for negative fees. Just saying. Well, from the people that are watching, Justifer says hi.
Okay.
Cool. Cool, guys. This has been great. Bastien, thanks for dropping by. Do you have any plans on visiting the U.S. anytime soon?
Oh yeah, I guess I've heard that it has become complete madness recently with testing to just get into the US. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So not that soon, but
Okay.
maybe soon-ish, at least in 2022. I'm hopeful that there will be a nice conference or something that I can attend in the US and see all the folks. So yeah,
I hope
hopeful.
so too.
Are we gonna make in April? There's the Bitcoin Miami, trying to make
That's
that
what I was alluding to, but
thing. Oh, I see. Okay.
Ah,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm gonna try and I don't know. We're gonna try and run some LARPs there, and I'm trying to talk Blockstream into organizing a research day.
okay.
mm,
Oh, let me know. We hadn't looked into it a lot because we missed the last one because of COVID and too many different conferences at the same time. And since there's already things planned in March, I was not expecting to do something in April. But yeah, let us know if there's something building around Lightning, because yeah, I was a bit afraid of this. This is a huge conference with so many things that yeah, I was afraid it would be too big. But yeah, maybe it's worth coming. Let me know.
yeah, we can definitely talk. There was the best part about last year was actually the small conversations that we all get together afterwards and talk. So
That's how Nate and I met in Miami
Yeah.
last year. So yeah,
yep, good times.
cool.
Awesome. Thanks again. Welcome back.